Security. This man stole someone's ticket. I refuse to sit next to a criminal in first class. Jennifer Walsh's voice cuts through the airplane cabin like a knife through silence. Her perfectly manicured finger points directly at the black man sitting calmly in seat 2A, reading what appears to be medical journals. Her voice carries the authority of someone accustomed to being heard, accustomed to being obeyed. The entire first-class cabin turns to stare. Conversations stop mid-sentence. The gentle hum of pre-flight activity freezes into uncomfortable tension. 12 passengers, 2 flight attendants, and 1 very composed man in khakis suddenly find themselves witnesses to something that will change everything. Before we dive into this story that shocked an entire airline industry, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe dignity and respect should have no color barriers, hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to see it. Because what happens next will restore your faith in humanity while exposing the ugly truth about assumptions. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks doesn't look up from his journal immediately. His hands remain steady, his breathing calm. 25 years of practicing medicine have taught him patience. 15 years of running a Fortune 500 company have taught him control. But nothing quite prepares you for being accused of theft in front of strangers because of the color of your skin. Jennifer Walsh stands in the aisle like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments. Her navy Armani suit cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her briefcase bears the gold-embossed logo of Walsh & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms. Everything about her screams success privilege and the absolute certainty that she belongs here, the man she's accusing. He's wearing khakis from Target and a polo shirt that could have come from any department store. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry, no obvious signs of wealth. To Jennifer, this means everything. To her, first class is reserved for people like her. People who've earned the right through money status, and most importantly, appearance. Flight attendant Carlos Rivera freezes in the galley doorway, a tray of pre-departure champagne trembling in his hands. 6 months on the job and he's never faced anything like this. Company training covered unruly passengers, medical emergencies, even hijacking protocols. But nobody taught him what to do when a passenger accuses another passenger of theft based on nothing but prejudice. Ma'am, Carlos manages his voice barely above a whisper. Is there a specific problem with this passenger's documentation? Jennifer whirls around her blonde bob, swinging like a weapon. Look at him, she snaps. Does he look like he belongs in first class? I've been flying first class for 20 years, and I know an imposter when I see one. Other passengers begin pulling out phones. In 2024, everything becomes content. Every conflict becomes viral potential. But something feels different about this moment. The tension is too real, too raw. This isn't performance art or social media drama. This is bias stripped naked and put on display at 35,000 feet. Robert Chen, a tech executive in seat 1C, quietly activates his phone's camera. He's seen this before, not on airplanes but in boardrooms, hotel lobbies, exclusive restaurants. The moment when someone's prejudice becomes so obvious that silence becomes complicity. Maria Santos, 73 years old and traveling with her husband to visit their new grandson, watches from seat 3B. Her weathered hands clutch her purse tighter. She's lived long enough to recognize hatred wearing the mask of concern. She's seen enough injustice to know that staying quiet makes you part of the problem. Lisa Rodriguez adjusts her toddler in seat 4A, but her attention is fixed on the unfolding drama. At 34, she's already taught her daughter that fairness matters more than comfort, that speaking up matters more than keeping peace, that some moments demand witness. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks finally closes his journal. The motion is deliberate, controlled. His dark eyes meet Jennifer Walsh's blue ones directly, without challenge, without backing down. When he speaks, his voice carries the quiet authority of someone who's saved lives, built companies, and changed industries. Ma'am, I believe you're mistaken, he says calmly. This is my seat. I purchased this ticket. Perhaps you should check your own boarding pass. Jennifer's face flushes red. Don't you dare tell me to check anything, she shouts. I know exactly where I belong. The question is, how did you get past security? The accusation hangs in the recycled air like poison gas. Carlos Rivera sets down his tray and reaches for his radio, unsure whether to call for backup or for a supervisor. His hands shake slightly. This is exactly the kind of situation that ends careers, that creates lawsuits, that turns ordinary flights into international incidents. Captain Maria Santos's voice crackles over the intercom. Flight attendants, please prepare for departure. We're number 3 for takeoff, but first class isn't preparing for anything except confrontation. Jennifer Walsh has planted herself in the aisle like a human roadblock, her expensive luggage scattered around her feet. She's made her stand, chosen her hill to die on. In her mind, this is about more than seating assignments. This is about maintaining order, preserving standards, keeping the right people in the right places. What Jennifer Walsh doesn't know is that the man she's trying to humiliate has already changed more lives than she'll ever touch. What she doesn't realize is that every second of this confrontation is being recorded, documented, broadcast to the world. What she can't imagine is that in 30 minutes, she'll be begging for forgiveness from the very man she's trying to destroy. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks reaches into his pocket and pulls out his phone. Not to argue, not to threaten, but to make a quiet call that will change everything. 6 hours earlier, Dr. Nathaniel Brooks stood in the gleaming conference room on the 42nd floor of Brooks Medical Technologies, overlooking downtown Chicago's skyline. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mahogany table where 15 board members sat in expensive suits discussing numbers that would make most people dizzy, the St. Matthew's Children's Hospital donation is approved, announced Elena Vasquez, the company's chief operating officer. $50 million distributed over 5 years. That brings our total charitable giving to over $200 million this fiscal year. Nathaniel nodded quietly, reviewing the paperwork that would save countless young lives. Brooks Medical Technologies didn't just manufacture medical equipment, they revolutionized it. Heart monitors that detected problems before symptoms appeared, surgical robots that performed operations with microscopic precision, life support devices that had reduced infant mortality rates by 30% wherever they were installed. But numbers on spreadsheets weren't what drove Nathaniel Brooks. What motivated him were the handwritten thank you letters tucked away in his desk drawer, notes from parents whose children were alive because of his company's innovations, photos of smiling kids who'd been born with defective hearts fixed with Brooks Medical Technology, now playing soccer and learning piano and chasing dreams. Sir, said David Mitchell, his executive assistant. Your flight to Atlanta leaves at 2:15. Should I arrange the corporate jet? Nathaniel shook his head. Book me a commercial flight. First class is fine, but I want to fly with regular people. Sometimes you need to step outside the bubble to remember why you're working. This decision would change everything. If Nathaniel had taken the private jet, Jennifer Walsh never would have had the chance to show her true colors. The viral moment that would reshape airline policies never would have happened. But Nathaniel Brooks believed in staying connected to the real world, even when the real world sometimes showed him its ugliest face. The real purpose of this Atlanta trip wasn't business meetings or investor presentations. Nathaniel was making a surprise visit to St. Matthew's Children's Hospital, the same facility his company had just approved for a $50 million donation. He did this quarterly, unannounced visits to hospitals where Brooks Medical equipment was saving lives. Not for publicity, not for tax write-offs, but to see firsthand whether his company's mission was actually making a difference. 3 months earlier, he'd visited Children's Memorial in Dallas. A 7-year-old girl named Isabella Martinez had been born with a heart defect so severe that 3 different surgeons refused to operate. Then, Brooks Medical's newest cardiac monitor detected a rhythm pattern that revealed a previously unknown complication. The discovery led to a successful surgery that saved Isabella's life. Mr. Brooks saved my daughter, Isabella's mother, had whispered, tears streaming down her face. The doctor said it was impossible, but his machine saw what human eyes couldn't see. These moments mattered more to Nathaniel than Forbes rankings or stock prices, more than the corporate yacht gathering dust in Lake Michigan, more than the penthouse apartment he rarely used because he was always working, always traveling, always focused on the next breakthrough that could save the next child. Nathaniel's journey to this moment had started 45 years earlier in Southside Chicago, where his mother Denise worked 3 jobs to keep their family afloat. She cleaned office buildings at night, served lunch at a community center during the day, and somehow found time to help Nathaniel with his homework every evening. When he was 8 years old, his younger sister Keisha developed a rare heart condition. "The doctors say we need a specialist," Denise had told 8-year-old Nathaniel. "But specialists cost money we don't have." Keisha died 3 months later, not because her condition was untreatable, but because cutting-edge medical technology wasn't available in their neighborhood. The cardiac monitor that could have detected her problem early was installed at Northwestern Memorial 15 miles away and financially unreachable for a single mother working minimum-wage jobs. That loss shaped everything Nathaniel would become. Medical school at Northwestern funded by academic scholarships and student loans that took 15 years to repay. Residency at Chicago General, where he specialized in pediatric cardiology. The decision to leave medicine for technology after realizing he could save more children by inventing better equipment than by performing individual surgeries. Brooks Medical Technologies started in a rented garage with 3 employees and a revolutionary idea: medical equipment designed specifically for underserved communities. Devices that were powerful enough for major hospitals but affordable enough for rural clinics. Technology that could detect problems early when treatment was still possible and hope was still alive. 20 years later, the company employed 12,000 people across 6 countries. Brooks Medical Equipment operated in over 800 hospitals worldwide. The technology had directly contributed to saving over 50,000 lives with documentation to prove it. Nathaniel kept every thank you letter, every photo, every medical report that showed successful outcomes. But success hadn't insulated him from prejudice. The boardrooms where he commanded respect were the exception, not the rule. In restaurants, hotel lobbies, and apparently airplane cabins, he was still just another black man who might not belong. Still someone whose presence required explanation, whose credentials needed verification, whose right to occupy space was always subject to challenge. This morning's flight to Atlanta was supposed to be routine. 3 hours of quiet preparation for tomorrow's hospital visit. Time to review patient outcomes, study new technology installations, and mentally prepare for conversations with families whose lives had been changed by his company's work. Instead, Nathaniel found himself packing his simplest clothes: khakis instead of suits, polo shirts instead of tailored dress shirts. He'd learned long ago that flying under the radar sometimes revealed important truths about the world around him. When people didn't know who he was, they showed him who they really were. Sarah Mitchell, his personal assistant for 8 years, knocked on his office door. "Mr. Brooks, your car is here. Flight 1247 to Atlanta, departing at 2:15 from O'Hare." "Thank you, Sarah. I'll call you when I land." "Sir, are you sure you don't want the corporate jet weather reports show potential delays for commercial flights?" Nathaniel smiled. Sometimes delays teach you things you need to learn. Sometimes the most important conversations happen when you least expect them. Sarah had worked with Nathaniel long enough to recognize his philosophical moments. When he talked about unexpected conversations and teachable moments, he was usually preparing for something significant. She just never imagined that something significant would be a confrontation with a racist passenger that would change airline policies nationwide. As Nathaniel's black sedan pulled away from Brooks Medical Headquarters heading toward O'Hare Airport and an encounter that would define his legacy, he had no idea that Jennifer Walsh was simultaneously boarding the same flight with her own agenda. Jennifer Walsh had spent the morning in a heated deposition for her most important case, defending Hartwell Industries against a discrimination lawsuit filed by 3 former employees. Her client stood accused of creating a hostile work environment, of denying promotions based on race, of fostering a culture where bias flourished unchallenged. Ms. Walsh, the opposing attorney, had argued your client's internal emails clearly show a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Certain types of people don't fit our corporate image. Those are direct quotes from your client's management. Jennifer had countered aggressively. Corporate image standards are not discriminatory when applied equally. My client has every right to maintain professional appearances and cultural fit. The irony was perfect and poisonous. In 3 hours, Jennifer Walsh would demonstrate exactly the kind of bias her client was accused of promoting. She would become a living example of the prejudice she was being paid to defend. The universe has a twisted sense of humor sometimes. Flight 1247 was Jennifer's escape from a frustrating morning, her reward for winning a difficult case, her chance to relax in the comfort and exclusivity of first class. She'd specifically chosen this flight because it was typically filled with business travelers, corporate executives, and successful professionals. People like her. People who belonged. The collision between Jennifer's assumptions and Nathaniel's reality was inevitable. When privilege meets prejudice at 35,000 feet, someone's worldview is about to crash. The boarding process for Flight 1247 began with the kind of technological hiccup that turns routine travel into social experiments. American Airlines passenger manifest processing crashed at 1:45 p.m., exactly 30 minutes before scheduled departure. Gate agents scrambled to verify reservations, manually cross-referencing boarding passes with backup databases that hadn't been updated since the morning. Carlos Rivera, the young flight attendant who would soon find himself at the center of a discrimination crisis, noticed the problem immediately when his tablet showed conflicting passenger information. Seat 2A appeared to be double-booked with both Dr. Nathaniel Brooks and a canceled reservation showing active status. "This processing is completely unreliable," muttered Jennifer Walsh as she approached the first-class cabin. Her designer heels clicked against the aircraft's metal floor with the rhythm of impatience. She'd been traveling for business for 2 decades and had no tolerance for inefficiency, delays, or anything that disrupted her carefully ordered world. Jennifer prided herself on reading people quickly, categorizing them efficiently. Essential skill for a corporate lawyer. In depositions, courtrooms, and boardrooms, she could assess credibility, authority, and threat level within seconds of meeting someone. This talent had made her extraordinarily successful at Walsh & Associates, where she specialized in defending corporations against discrimination lawsuits. The irony was as subtle as a brick through a window. As Jennifer entered first class, her mental catalog automatically activated. Seat 1A, middle-aged businessman in expensive suit reading Wall Street Journal. Check. Seat 1C, Asian tech executive with designer laptop speaking quietly in Mandarin. Acceptable. Seat 3A, elderly white couple, conservative dress, expensive jewelry. Perfect. Then her eyes landed on Seat 2A, and her internal alarm bells started ringing. Black man, casual clothes, reading medical journals that could be props. In her experience, this combination meant one thing: someone was out of place. Someone had gained access to first class through luck, error, or fraud. Someone who needed to be challenged, Dr. Nathaniel Brooks, meanwhile, was completely absorbed in a research paper about innovative cardiac catheterization techniques for premature infants. His company had just developed a microcatheter 1/3 the size of previous models, potentially saving hundreds of newborns annually. The mathematical precision required for such delicate engineering fascinated him more than any corporate drama. He was unaware of Jennifer's scrutiny, unbothered by her approaching presence. 25 years of breaking barriers had taught him that some people would always question his right to occupy space. But it had also taught him that dignity was internal, that respect was earned through character, and that other people's limitations didn't define his worth. Jennifer Walsh had a different philosophy entirely. "Excuse me," she said, standing directly beside Nathaniel's seat. Her voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to immediate attention. "I think there might be some confusion about seating arrangements." Nathaniel looked up politely. "Good afternoon." "Is there a problem?" The question was genuine, delivered without defensiveness or aggression. But to Jennifer, his calm confidence looked like arrogance. His comfort in first class looked like entitlement. His presence looked like a mistake that needed correction. "Yes, actually, there is a problem," Jennifer continued. "The boarding processing has been malfunctioning, and I suspect there might be irregularities with some of the reservations. Have you verified your seat assignment with the flight crew?" Carlos Rivera emerged from the galley at that moment, carrying the tray of pre-departure champagne that would soon be forgotten in the chaos. He caught the tail end of Jennifer's question and sensed trouble brewing. 6 months of flight attendant experience had taught him to recognize the early warning signs of passenger conflicts. "Is everything okay here?" Carlos asked carefully. Jennifer pounced on his question like a prosecutor sensing weakness. "I was just asking this gentleman about his seat verification. With all the processing problems today, I want to make sure everyone's in their correct location." The words were carefully chosen, technically reasonable, but delivered with unmistakable implication. Jennifer wasn't questioning the processing. She was questioning Nathaniel's right to be there. Robert Chen, the tech executive in 1C, looked up from his laptop. 20 years in Silicon Valley had taught him to recognize coded language to spot bias disguised as concern. He'd heard variations of this conversation in conference rooms and investor meetings. "Have you verified your technical background? Are you sure you're in the right department? Is your visa status current?" Always questions that seemed reasonable on the surface but carried deeper implications about who belonged and who didn't. Maria Santos, the 73-year-old grandmother in seat 3B, recognized something even more familiar. She'd grown up in 1950s Texas, where concern about proper documentation had been used to exclude people from restaurants, hotels, and public facilities. The language had evolved, but the sentiment remained unchanged. "Young man," Maria said directly to Nathaniel, "is this lady bothering you?" The question cut through Jennifer's pretense like a sword through silk. No coded language, no diplomatic phrasing, just a straightforward challenge to obvious harassment. Jennifer's face flushed red. "I'm not bothering anyone. I'm trying to ensure proper procedures are followed." "What procedures?" asked Lisa Rodriguez from seat 4A. Her toddler was playing with a tablet, oblivious to the adult tension building around her, checking black passengers' tickets, but not white ones. The cabin temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Lisa had said what everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to articulate. She'd named the bias that Jennifer was trying to disguise as policy enforcement. Carlos Rivera felt sweat beading on his forehead. Company training covered difficult passengers, but this was different. This wasn't drunk travelers or carry-on disputes. This was discrimination happening in real time with multiple witnesses recording everything on their phones. Ma'am Carlos said to Jennifer, "All passengers in first class have been verified during boarding. If you have concerns about your own seating assignment, I'd be happy to check your ticket." Jennifer's composure cracked slightly. "My seating assignment is fine. I'm questioning his." She pointed directly at Nathaniel, abandoning any pretense of general concern. The accusation was now explicit, personal, and racially charged. Nathaniel Brooks set down his medical journal and looked at Jennifer Walsh with the same calm intensity he used when explaining complex procedures to worried parents. His voice remained steady, professional, unflappable. "Ma'am, I purchased this seat with my own credit card 3 weeks ago. I checked in online this morning using the confirmation number sent to my email. My boarding pass was scanned at the gate and my ID was verified by the gate agent. If you have specific evidence of irregularity, I suggest you present it. Otherwise, I suggest you take your seat and allow the crew to prepare for departure." The response was perfect in its politeness and devastating in its logic. Nathaniel had just dismantled Jennifer's entire position without raising his voice, without showing anger, without giving her any ammunition for escalation. But logic and evidence had never stopped prejudice before. If anything, Nathaniel's articulate response made Jennifer more determined to prove her point. "Anyone can buy a ticket online," Jennifer shot back. "Anyone can fake confirmation numbers. I've seen this scam before. People using stolen credit cards, fake identities, anything to access luxury services they can't afford." The accusation hung in the air like poisonous smoke. Jennifer had just accused Nathaniel of credit card fraud, identity theft, and criminal conspiracy. Not in private, not in whispers, but loudly enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. Robert Chen's finger hovered over his phone's record button. Maria Santos clutched her husband's hand tighter. Lisa Rodriguez put a protective arm around her toddler, instinctively shielding innocence from ugliness. Carlos Rivera realized he was facing a career-defining moment. How he handled the next 60 seconds would determine whether he was remembered as someone who stood up for justice or someone who enabled discrimination through silence. "Ma'am," Carlos said to Jennifer, his voice firmer now, "I need to ask you to return to your seat. Your accusations are inappropriate and unfounded." Jennifer whirled around to face him. "Are you refusing to investigate? Are you ignoring obvious fraud to avoid dealing with an uncomfortable situation?" The challenge was expertly delivered. Jennifer was a professional lawyer who knew exactly how to phrase accusations to create maximum pressure while maintaining plausible deniability. She was forcing Carlos to choose between confronting her or appearing negligent in his duties. But Jennifer Walsh had made a critical miscalculation. She assumed that everyone shared her prejudices, that other passengers would support her reasonable concerns, that authority figures would naturally side with an expensively dressed white woman over a casually dressed black man. Instead, she was about to discover that character reveals itself under pressure, that dignity recognizes no dress code, and that sometimes the person you're trying to humiliate commands more respect than you'll ever understand. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks reached into his pocket not for his wallet or boarding pass, but for his phone. The call he was about to make would change everything. "Sarah, it's Nathaniel," Dr. Brooks said quietly into his phone. "I need you to pull up my flight information for American Flight 147. Yes, I'm on the plane now. We have a situation that requires documentation." Jennifer Walsh's eyes narrowed as she watched him make the call. In her legal experience, people who were guilty of fraud didn't call for backup. They tried to de-escalate quickly and quietly. But people who were innocent often gathered evidence to protect themselves. A tiny seed of doubt began growing in Jennifer's mind, but her pride had already carried her too far to back down gracefully. "Who are you calling?" Jennifer demanded. "Your accomplice. The person who sold you that stolen ticket." The accusation was so outrageous, so obviously rooted in racial prejudice, rather than evidence, that several passengers actually gasped audibly. Robert Chen's phone was now recording everything. Maria Santos was shaking her head in disgust. Lisa Rodriguez was explaining to her toddler that some people say mean things when they're scared of people who look different. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks continued his quiet phone conversation as if Jennifer wasn't standing 3 feet away hurling accusations. His calm was beginning to unnerve other passengers who expected anger, defensiveness, or emotional response. Instead, they watched a man handling crisis with surgical precision. "Sarah, I need you to contact American Airlines corporate office immediately. Reference discrimination incident on Flight 1247 seat assignments, 1B and 2A. Yes, I want full documentation of the interaction. Time stamps, witness statements, everything." Carlos Rivera felt his stomach drop. Corporate involvement meant investigations, reviews, potential terminations. His 6-month probationary period wasn't over yet. If this situation spiraled out of control, he could lose his job before his career even started. Sir Carlos said to Nathaniel, "Perhaps we could resolve this more quietly." It was exactly the wrong thing to say. Carlos had just suggested that discrimination should be handled quietly, that bias was more comfortable when it wasn't public, that victims should minimize their own harassment to avoid making others uncomfortable. "No," Nathaniel said firmly. "We won't resolve this quietly. This woman has publicly accused me of credit card fraud, identity theft, and criminal conspiracy." She's demanded verification of my right to occupy this seat, based solely on the color of my skin. This conversation will be documented, investigated, and resolved according to law and policy." Jennifer realized she was losing control of the narrative. Her carefully worded concerns about proper procedures were being reframed as what they actually were: racist attacks on a paying passenger. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. "Don't try to make this about race," Jennifer snapped. "This is about security, about proper verification, about maintaining standards in premium cabins." "Whose security?" asked Maria Santos from seat 3B. "Are you threatened by a man reading medical journals?" "What verification?" added Lisa Rodriguez. He showed his boarding pass. His ID was checked at the gate. "What additional verification do you require? What standards?" Robert Chen chimed in. "The standard that black passengers need extra documentation. The standard that their presence requires." Explanation: Jennifer found herself surrounded by challenges to her position, attacked from multiple directions by passengers who refused to enable her bias. This wasn't the support she'd expected. In her experience, other privileged passengers usually remained silent during uncomfortable situations, allowing discrimination to proceed without interference. Instead, first class had become a tribunal with Jennifer as the defendant and her own words as evidence against her. "This is ridiculous," Jennifer declared, her voice rising with desperation. "Look at him. Look at how he's dressed. Does he look like someone who can afford first-class tickets?" The words escaped before Jennifer could stop them. She'd finally said what she'd been thinking all along, stripped away all pretense about security and procedures and documentation. She'd revealed the real reason for her harassment: Dr. Nathaniel Brooks didn't look wealthy enough to belong in first class. The cabin fell into stunned silence. Even Carlos Rivera, trained to remain neutral in passenger disputes, looked shocked by the blatant prejudice. Dr. Brooks closed his phone and looked directly at Jennifer Walsh. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades breaking barriers, challenging assumptions, and proving doubters wrong. "Ms. Walsh," he said, using her name for the first time, "you've made several interesting assumptions about my financial status based on my appearance. You've accused me of multiple felonies without evidence. You've demanded special verification of my right to occupy space that I've paid for. And now you've explicitly stated that my clothing choices disqualify me from first-class accommodations." Jennifer's mouth fell open slightly. How did he know her name? "You seem to believe that wealth requires a uniform, that success has a dress code, that respect can be measured by thread count and brand labels. Those beliefs might serve you well in corporate boardrooms, but they're quite useless for judging character, capability, or contributions." Nathaniel's words were delivered without anger, without personal attack. He was simply dismantling her worldview piece by piece, using her own arguments against her. "How do you know my name?" Jennifer whispered. "Ms. Walsh, we're about to take off. I suggest you return to your seat before the captain requests your removal from the aircraft." Captain Maria Santos's voice crackled over the intercom at that moment. "Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for departure. We've been cleared for takeoff." But first class was nowhere near prepared for departure. Jennifer Walsh remained standing in the aisle, her expensive luggage scattered around her feet like evidence of an explosion. Carlos Rivera stood frozen between his duty to maintain order and his fear of making the situation worse. The passengers were no longer pretending to mind their own business. Robert Chen's phone was recording everything. Maria Santos was whispering urgently to her husband. Lisa Rodriguez was explaining the situation to friends via text message. And Dr. Nathaniel Brooks was making another phone call. "Elena," he said to his chief operating officer, "I need you to patch me through to American Airlines executive offices. Yes, from the plane. We're having a discrimination incident that requires immediate corporate attention." Jennifer's face went pale. "Corporate attorneys don't make casual phone calls to airline executives. Criminals don't demand immediate investigation of their own alleged crimes. Innocent passengers don't have direct access to corporate decision-makers unless they wield significant influence." For the first time since boarding the plane, Jennifer Walsh began to wonder if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Sir Carlos Rivera approached Nathaniel's seat carefully. "I understand there's been a misunderstanding, but corporate involvement seems extreme for a seating confusion." "Mr. Rivera," Nathaniel replied, reading the flight attendant's name tag. "There's no seating confusion. There's a passenger harassing another passenger based on racial prejudice. There's an employee failing to address discrimination because it's uncomfortable. And there's an airline that's about to discover whether their diversity policies exist on paper or in practice." Carlos felt heat rising in his cheeks. He'd been called out for his failure to protect a passenger from harassment for his suggestion that discrimination should be handled quietly for prioritizing his own comfort over justice. "I apologize, sir. You're absolutely right." Ma'am Carlos turned to Jennifer. "I need to ask you to return to your seat immediately. Your behavior is disruptive and inappropriate." Jennifer's carefully constructed world began crumbling around her. The flight attendant was siding with her target. The passengers were documenting her behavior, and somehow, impossibly, the man she'd tried to humiliate seemed to have more authority than she did. "This is insane," Jennifer exploded. "You're all acting like I'm the criminal here. I'm trying to ensure security and proper procedures, and you're treating me like some kind of racist." "If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck," muttered Robert Chen loud enough for everyone to hear. "Excuse me." Jennifer spun toward him. "You've accused a black passenger of crimes without evidence. You've demanded special verification of his documentation. You've stated that his appearance disqualifies him from first-class service. If that's not racism, what would you call it?" Jennifer opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Because Robert Chen was right. Every action she'd taken, every accusation she'd made, every demand she'd voiced had been rooted in racial prejudice. And now it was all being recorded, documented, and reported to corporate executives. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks's phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Dr. Brooks, this is David Thompson, American Airlines Vice President of Customer Relations. We've received reports of a discrimination incident on Flight 147. Can you please explain the situation?" Nathaniel put the call on speaker, allowing the entire first-class cabin to hear the corporate response. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Dr. Nathaniel Brooks, CEO of Brooks Medical Technologies. I'm a first-class passenger on your flight, and I've been subjected to harassment, false accusations, and discriminatory treatment by another passenger. Your flight crew has been witnesses to the incident, and multiple passengers have recorded the interaction." Jennifer Walsh's knees nearly buckled. "CEO, Brooks Medical Technologies." She'd heard that name before, in boardrooms, in medical journals, and business publications. Brooks Medical was one of the largest medical technology companies in the world. The man she'd accused of credit card fraud was a billionaire. The man she'd said didn't belong in first-class owned companies that could buy and sell airlines. The man whose appearance she'd mocked had built an empire that saved children's lives daily. Jennifer Walsh had just committed career suicide at 35,000 feet, and the flight hadn't even taken off yet. But the humiliation was only beginning. David Thompson's voice carried the tension of a man whose Monday morning had just become a corporate nightmare. Through the speakerphone, his words reached every passenger in first class, turning a private conversation into a public reckoning. "Dr. Brooks, on behalf of American Airlines, I want to apologize immediately for any discriminatory treatment you've experienced. We're implementing emergency protocols to address this situation. Can you identify the passenger involved?" All eyes turned to Jennifer Walsh, who stood frozen in the aisle like a deer caught in corporate headlights. Her expensive briefcase trembled in her manicured hands. Her perfectly styled blonde hair seemed to wilt under the weight of sudden scrutiny. "The passenger is Jennifer Walsh, seated in 1B, Dr. Brooks replied calmly. "She's accused me of credit card fraud, identity theft, and criminal conspiracy. She's demanded special verification of my documentation. She's explicitly stated that my appearance disqualifies me from first-class accommodations." Each accusation landed like a physical blow. Jennifer's face cycled through colors. Red with embarrassment, pale with fear, green with nausea, as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. "Ms. Walsh," David Thompson's voice carried the authority of corporate crisis management. "You are speaking with Dr. Nathaniel Brooks, CEO and founder of Brooks Medical Technologies, one of the world's largest medical equipment manufacturers. Dr. Brooks is also a major shareholder in several airline industry partnerships. He is what we would consider a platinum-level customer." The words hit Jennifer like a freight train. Not just successful, elite, not just wealthy, influential, not just a passenger, a stakeholder in the very industry she'd just humiliated herself within. Carlos Rivera felt sweat beating on his forehead as he realized he'd been witnessing a discrimination incident involving one of the airline's most valuable customers. His suggestion to handle this quietly now seemed not just inappropriate, but professionally suicidal. Robert Chen couldn't suppress a small smile as he continued recording. As a tech executive, he knew Brooks Medical's reputation. Their cardiac monitoring devices had revolutionized pediatric surgery. Their innovations had saved thousands of lives. Watching Jennifer Walsh realize she'd attacked a genuine humanitarian hero was like witnessing karma in real time. Furthermore, David Thompson continued, "Brooks Medical Technologies is currently negotiating a $50 million contract to supply medical equipment for our in-flight emergency procedures. Dr. Brooks personally oversees those negotiations." Jennifer's briefcase slipped from her hands, hitting the cabin floor with a thud that seemed to echo through the airplane. $50 million. She'd just potentially cost American Airlines a $50 million contract because she couldn't tolerate a black man in first class. Maria Santos reached for her husband's hand. In 73 years of life, she'd never seen prejudice backfire so spectacularly. The woman who'd tried to humiliate Dr. Brooks was now facing consequences that would follow her for the rest of her career. "Dr. Brooks," David Thompson continued, "we're arranging for Ms. Walsh to be removed from the flight immediately. We're also conducting an immediate review of our anti-discrimination policies and procedures. Your experience today is unacceptable and will not be tolerated." "Wait," Jennifer whispered, her voice barely audible. Then louder, more desperately, "Wait. This is all a misunderstanding. I never said anything about race. I was concerned about security procedures." Dr. Brooks looked at her with the same patient expression he used when explaining complex medical procedures to frightened parents. "Ms. Walsh, you stated that I don't look like someone who can afford first-class tickets. You demanded verification of my documentation that you didn't request from other passengers. You accused me of crimes without evidence. Multiple witnesses have recorded your statements. Attempting to rewrite history won't change documented facts." Lisa Rodriguez, still holding her toddler, spoke up from seat 4A. "Ma'am, we all heard what you said. My daughter heard what you said. You can't pretend it didn't happen when 12 people witnessed it." Jennifer looked around the cabin, desperately seeking an ally, someone who might support her version of events. Instead, she found 12 sets of eyes that had watched her reveal her true character. Phones that had recorded her bias. Witnesses who would never forget what they'd seen. "Mr. Thompson," Dr. Brooks continued, "I appreciate American Airlines' immediate response. However, I want to be clear about something. This incident isn't about me personally. I'm successful enough to handle discrimination. It's unfortunate, but manageable. I'm concerned about passengers who don't have my resources, my connections, my platform. How many other travelers have been harassed by Miss Walsh? How many other incidents have been handled quietly, rather than addressed directly?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to the entire airline industry. Dr. Brooks wasn't seeking personal vindication. He was demanding structural change. "That's an excellent point, Dr. Brooks. We're immediately reviewing all passenger complaints involving Ms. Walsh. We're also implementing new training protocols for situations like this." Jennifer Walsh felt the walls closing in around her. Every passenger complaint would be scrutinized. Every interaction would be investigated. Years of similar behavior. because there had been years of similar behavior, would now be exposed, documented, and potentially prosecuted. "Please, Jennifer," whispered, approaching Dr. Brooks' seat. "Can we discuss this privately? I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." Dr. Brooks looked up from his medical journal with the same calm expression he'd maintained throughout the entire confrontation. "Ms. Walsh, there's been no misunderstanding. You've shown me exactly who you are. You've demonstrated exactly what you believe. You've revealed exactly how you treat people you consider beneath you. The only misunderstanding was your assumption that your prejudices would be tolerated, enabled, or ignored." Captain Maria Santos's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay due to a passenger situation. We'll be departing as soon as the issue is resolved." But the issue was far from resolved. Jennifer Walsh's discrimination had triggered corporate protocols that would ripple through the airline industry for years. Emergency meetings were being convened. Legal teams were being briefed. Policy manuals were being rewritten. And Dr. Nathaniel Brooks was making one more phone call. "Sarah," he said to his assistant, "contact Brooks Medical's legal department. I want a complete review of all contracts with American Airlines and their subsidiary companies. Also reach out to our media relations team. This incident will be public within hours. I want our response prepared and coordinated." Jennifer realized she wasn't just facing personal consequences. Her actions had triggered a corporate crisis that could affect millions in revenue, thousands in employment, and countless future policies. All because she couldn't tolerate sharing first class with a black man. The airplane door opened and 2 airport security officers boarded, followed by an American Airlines supervisor carrying official paperwork. "Ms. Jennifer Walsh?" the supervisor asked. "Yes," Jennifer replied weakly. "Ma'am, you're being removed from this flight due to discriminatory behavior toward another passenger. You're also being placed on American Airlines' no-fly list pending further investigation." As security officers flanked Jennifer collecting her luggage and preparing to escort her off the plane, she made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Dr. Brooks," she called out, "surely you understand that this was all a misunderstanding. Surely someone in your position recognizes that people make mistakes under stress." Dr. Brooks closed his medical journal and looked at her with the weight of 45 years of broken barriers, shattered assumptions, and hard-won respect. "Ms. Walsh," he said quietly, "people reveal their true character under stress. You've shown me yours. Now the world will see it too." As Jennifer Walsh was escorted off Flight 1247, her legal career effectively ended. Her reputation destroyed, her assumptions shattered. The passengers left behind began to process what they'd witnessed. But the most important moment of the entire flight was still to come, because Dr. Nathaniel Brooks was about to receive recognition that would restore everyone's faith in humanity, while proving that respect recognizes no seat assignment. Flight 1047 sat quietly on the tarmac as ground crews completed their final preparations. The removal of Jennifer Walsh had left first class with an unusual energy. Part relief, part tension, part anticipation of what would come next. Passengers checked their phones, shared whispered conversations, and tried to process the discrimination incident they'd just witnessed. Captain Maria Santos had been monitoring the situation from the cockpit, receiving updates from corporate headquarters and ground control. 22 years of flying experience had shown her many difficult situations, but nothing quite like this. When her supervisor called with instructions from the airline's executive board, she knew this flight would be remembered long after landing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Santos announced over the intercom, her voice carrying unusual warmth and formality. "This is your captain speaking. Before we depart for Atlanta, I want to address what happened in our cabin today." The airplane fell completely silent. Even passengers in coach who had heard rumors about a first-class incident stopped their conversations to listen. "We just removed a passenger for discriminatory behavior toward Dr. Nathaniel Brooks, who is traveling with us in first class. Dr. Brooks handled an unacceptable situation with extraordinary dignity and grace. But I want you to know who we have aboard our aircraft today." Dr. Brooks looked up from his medical journal, slightly uncomfortable with the attention, but understanding its importance for the broader message about respect and recognition. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks is the CEO and founder of Brooks Medical Technologies, one of the world's most innovative medical equipment companies. His inventions have directly contributed to saving over 50,000 children's lives worldwide. A murmur of recognition rippled through the cabin. Several passengers pulled out phones, quickly searching for information about Brooks Medical Technologies. The search results were staggering. Breakthrough innovations, humanitarian awards, billions in charitable giving. But more importantly, Captain Santos continued. Dr. Brooks represents something we should all remember. Respect recognizes. No seat assignment, dignity travels in any cabin, and character needs no dress code. Would the passengers in first class please stand to show proper recognition for a man who has dedicated his life to saving children? The response was immediate and organic. Robert Chen, the tech executive in seat 1C, was first on his feet. Then Maria Santos, the elderly grandmother in 3B, slowly rose with her husband's help. Lisa Rodriguez stood up, lifting her toddler in her arms. But the recognition cascade was just beginning. "Wait," said Maria Santos, her elderly voice carrying newfound strength. "Captain, I need to share something. Dr. Brooks, you don't know me, but your company saved my grandson's life 3 years ago." The cabin fell silent as Maria's voice broke with emotion. "Miguel was born with a heart defect. The doctors at our local hospital said they couldn't help him. Their equipment was too old, not precise enough. But when they transferred him to Children's Memorial, they had your new cardiac monitors. The machines detected rhythms that human doctors couldn't see." Tears streamed down Maria's weathered cheeks as she continued. "Miguel is 6 years old now. He plays soccer. He laughs. He dreams of becoming a doctor himself someday. All because your machines saw what others couldn't see." Dr. Brooks felt his own emotions stirring. These were the moments that mattered more than corporate profits or medical awards. Real families, real children, real lives touched by his work. "Mrs. Santos," he said gently, "how is Miguel doing?" "He's perfect," Maria whispered. "He's absolutely perfect. And he's alive because of you." Lisa Rodriguez spoke up from seat 4A, still holding her toddler. "Dr. Brooks, my daughter Emma was born premature, weighing less than 2 pounds. The NICU at Northwestern Memorial used your company's infant monitoring equipment. The nurses said your technology helped them detect problems before they became critical." She looked down at her healthy, giggling 2-year-old daughter. "Emma wouldn't be here without Brooks Medical equipment. She wouldn't be laughing, wouldn't be learning to talk, wouldn't be driving me crazy with her endless energy." The recognition was spreading beyond first class now. Flight attendants were sharing the conversation with coach passengers who began standing in their seats to show respect for a man whose work had touched countless lives. Robert Chen, still recording everything on his phone, discovered information that made his jaw drop. "Dr. Brooks," he said, reading from his phone, "I had no idea about the scope of your work. Brooks Medical Technologies has donated over $200 million to children's hospitals in underserved communities. You've provided free equipment to rural hospitals across 6 countries." He scrolled through more search results, his amazement growing. The cardiac surgery program at Cook Children's Medical Center attributes a 30% reduction in infant mortality to your monitoring devices. The pediatric wing at St. Jude's uses exclusively Brooks Medical equipment. You've revolutionized child health care globally. Dr. Brooks felt deeply uncomfortable with the praise, but understood its importance for the broader message about assumptions and prejudice. "These innovations aren't my work alone," he said humbly. "I have 12,000 employees who share this mission. Medical professionals who provide feedback. Families who inspire us to keep improving." But the recognition cascade wasn't finished. Captain Santos's voice returned over the intercom. "Passengers, I'm receiving messages from our crew members throughout the aircraft. Flight attendant Patricia Gonzalez wants you to know that her nephew received life-saving surgery using Brooks medical equipment at Houston Methodist. Ground crew member James Wilson says his daughter's heart defect was corrected with procedures made possible by your innovations. The airplane was transforming into an impromptu testimonial gathering with strangers sharing stories of lives touched by Dr. Brooks' work. "This is incredible," whispered a businessman from Coach as he stood in the aisle. "We were just watching a discrimination incident, and now we're learning about a man who's saved thousands of children." The elderly man in seat 3A, Maria Santos's husband, struggled to his feet with emotion in his voice. "Dr. Brooks, my wife didn't tell you the whole story about our grandson. Miguel's parents are immigrants. They had no insurance, no money for specialized treatment. When your company learned about his case, Brooks Medical donated all the monitoring equipment for free. You didn't just save his life, you saved his family from financial ruin." Dr. Brooks felt tears welling in his eyes. These were the stories that validated every late night in the laboratory, every difficult business decision, every dollar invested in research and development. "Sir," he said to Maria's husband, "can you tell me Miguel's last name? I'd like our foundation to follow up, make sure he has access to ongoing cardiac monitoring as he grows." "Martinez," the elderly man replied. "Miguel Martinez. And Dr. Brooks. He wants to be a doctor when he grows up. Says he wants to save children the way you saved him." The emotional impact was overwhelming. The entire aircraft, first-class Coach crew members, was witnessing the revelation of a man whose quiet dignity had been tested by prejudice, but whose true character was revealed through decades of service to humanity. Lisa Rodriguez lifted her toddler higher and spoke directly to Dr. Brooks. "Emma, can you say thank you to the nice doctor who helped save your life?" 2-year-old Emma looked at Dr. Brooks with bright, innocent eyes and said clearly, "Thank you, doctor." The cabin erupted in applause. Not polite, obligatory clapping, but genuine, heartfelt recognition for a man whose life's work had created miracles in hospital rooms across the world. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks, who had maintained perfect composure while being accused of fraud and harassment, finally allowed emotion to show in his voice. "Thank you all," he said softly. "But please remember, this moment isn't about me. It's about recognizing that character has no color, that worth has no uniform, that respect should be given freely, rather than earned through credentials." He looked toward the empty seat where Jennifer Walsh had been sitting. The woman who was removed from this flight made assumptions based on appearance. She demanded verification based on prejudice. She couldn't imagine that someone who looked like me could belong in first class. But belonging isn't about how you look. It's about who you are. Captain Santos made one final announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is why we fly. Not just to transport people from one place to another, but to bring humanity together. Dr. Brooks, on behalf of American Airlines and everyone aboard this aircraft, thank you for your service to children and families worldwide. And thank you for handling an ugly situation with the grace and dignity that makes you the kind of person we're honored to serve." As the applause continued and passengers gradually returned to their seats, Flight 1247 prepared for departure. But the flight would now carry more than passengers from Chicago to Atlanta. It would carry a story of recognition, respect, and the power of character over prejudice. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks opened his medical journal and returned to reading about cardiac catheterization techniques for premature infants. But he was no longer just a passenger in seat 2A. He was a reminder that extraordinary people often travel in ordinary disguise, and that our assumptions about others reveal more about us than about them. Flight 1247 was finally ready for takeoff. The flight to Atlanta proceeded with an atmosphere unlike anything the crew had ever experienced. Passengers from Coach made respectful pilgrimages to first class, sharing brief stories about how Brooks Medical Technologies had touched their lives. Dr. Brooks graciously listened to each account, taking notes about specific cases for follow-up by his foundation's patient advocacy team. Carlos Rivera, the flight attendant who had initially suggested handling the discrimination, quietly approached Dr. Brooks' seat during beverage service with visible nervousness and genuine remorse. Dr. Brooks, I owe you a profound apology. Carlos said, his voice barely above a whisper. When this situation started, I was more concerned about avoiding conflict than addressing discrimination. I suggested handling your harassment quietly instead of standing up for what was right, Doctor. Brooks looked up from his medical journal with the same patient expression he'd maintained throughout the entire ordeal. Mr. Rivera, fear of confrontation is human, but silence in the face of injustice becomes complicity. The question isn't whether you made a mistake. It's what you'll do differently next time. Carlos nodded, understanding the weight of the lesson. Sir, I'm enrolling in additional sensitivity training. I want to make sure I never fail another passenger the way I initially failed you. That's commendable, Dr. Brooks replied. But remember, this isn't about training programs or corporate policies. It's about recognizing the humanity in every passenger regardless of appearance or assumptions. Meanwhile, the consequences of Jennifer Walsh's discrimination were rippling through multiple industries. American Airlines Executive Board convened an emergency session to address what was already being called the Brooks Incident across social media platforms. David Thompson, the airline's vice president of customer relations, was fielding calls from corporate partners, media outlets, and civil rights organizations. The video footage from Robert Chen's phone had already garnered over 200,000 views on multiple platforms with hashtags like #DignityAt35,000 and Respect Recognizes No Seat Assign Me NT trending nationally. This incident represents a complete failure of our values, Thompson admitted to the emergency board session via conference call. Dr. Brooks is not just a valued customer. He's a stakeholder in our industry partnerships and a humanitarian whose reputation is globally recognized. American Airlines issued a comprehensive public statement within 4 hours of the flight's departure. American Airlines categorically condemns the discriminatory behavior exhibited by passenger Jennifer Walsh toward Dr. Nathaniel Brooks on Flight 1247. Walsh has been permanently banned from all American Airlines flights and placed on industry-wide no-fly lists pending legal review. We are implementing immediate policy changes to ensure discrimination is addressed swiftly and decisively. The statement continued, Dr. Brooks exemplifies the dignity, grace, and character that all passengers deserve to experience during air travel. His contributions to pediatric medicine and humanitarian causes represent the highest ideals of service to humanity. American Airlines is honored to serve Dr. Brooks and commits to ensuring all passengers receive respectful treatment, regardless of appearance, background, or assumptions about economic status. Jennifer Walsh's law firm, Walsh & Associates, was simultaneously dealing with its own crisis management. Senior partners discovered that Jennifer's behavior on Flight 1247 directly contradicted her defense strategies in several ongoing discrimination cases. How could they argue that discriminatory behavior was unintentional when their own partner had demonstrated explicit bias on video? Managing partner Michael Foster called an emergency meeting to address the liability issues created by Jennifer's actions. Jennifer's behavior doesn't just affect her career. It undermines every discrimination defense we've mounted in the past 5 years, Foster explained to the firm's senior associates. We're potentially looking at malpractice claims, ethical violations, and reputation damage that could destroy our corporate practice. Within 6 hours of the incident, Walsh & Associates announced Jennifer's immediate termination and the establishment of a pro bono civil rights practice to demonstrate our firm's commitment to equality and justice. But the most significant consequences were playing out in the broader conversation about unconscious bias privilege and the assumptions people make based on appearance. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a civil rights attorney and frequent CNN legal analyst, used the incident as a teaching moment during her evening commentary. The Brooks incident illustrates how bias operates in everyday situations, Dr. Martinez explained to national television audiences. Jennifer Walsh didn't see herself as racist. She saw herself as maintaining standards. But standards based on appearance rather than behavior are inherently discriminatory. She continued, Dr. Brooks' response demonstrates the exhausting emotional labor required of successful minorities. He couldn't just be angry or defensive. He had to remain calm, articulate, and dignified while proving his right to exist in spaces where his presence was questioned. Social media responses to the incident revealed a society grappling with uncomfortable truths about assumption and prejudice. The hashtag #WhatDoesSuccess generated thousands of posts from professionals sharing their own experiences of being underestimated based on appearance. The response from Brooks Medical Technologies was characteristically focused on positive action rather than publicity. Dr. Brooks' assistant Sarah Mitchell coordinated with the company's foundation to establish a scholarship program for aviation industry diversity training and a grant fund for bias intervention research. Dr. Brooks doesn't seek attention for personal vindication, Sarah explained to reporters seeking interviews. He wants this incident to catalyze meaningful change in how people interact with each other, especially in professional and travel environments. The financial implications were also significant. American Airlines' stock price initially dropped 3% as investors worried about potential lawsuits and reputation damage. However, by market close shares had recovered and gained 2% as analysts noted the airline's decisive response to discrimination. Brooks Medical Technologies saw increased interest from hospital networks wanting to partner with a company led by someone who had handled crisis with such integrity. Character matters in business relationships, explained Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Chief Medical Officer at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Dr. Brooks's response to discrimination showed the kind of leadership we want in our equipment suppliers. But perhaps the most important immediate consequence was the conversation happening among passengers who had witnessed the incident firsthand. Maria Santos called her family immediately after landing to share the experience with her children and grandchildren. Miguel, she told her 6-year-old grandson via video call, "Remember how we always talk about the doctor who saved your life? Well, Grandma met him today, and I got to tell him how grateful our family is." Miguel Martinez, the boy whose life had been saved by Brooks Medical Equipment, smiled brightly on the phone screen. "Did you tell him I want to be a doctor too, Grandma? I did, mijo, and he wants to help you learn how to save other children." Lisa Rodriguez shared the story with her husband, emphasizing the lesson for their daughter Emma. Today, Emma saw both the ugliness of prejudice and the beauty of character, Lisa explained. She watched a woman judge someone by appearance, and she watched that man respond with grace. These are the moments that shape how children understand right and wrong. Robert Chen posted his video footage with a caption that summarized the experience for millions of viewers. "Today I watched a woman destroy her career by revealing her prejudices, and I watched a man elevate everyone around him by revealing his character. Respect recognizes no seat assignment. Dignity travels in any cabin. Character needs no ticket upgrade." As Flight 1247 touched down in Atlanta, the passengers carried with them more than luggage. They carried a story that would ripple through families, communities, and conversations for years to come. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks gathered his medical journals, thanked the crew for their professional handling of a difficult situation, and prepared to continue his mission of saving children's lives. But his quiet dignity in the face of discrimination had already saved something else: faith in the power of character over prejudice. As passengers began disembarking Flight 1247 in Atlanta, an unexpected scene unfolded that would provide the emotional crescendo to an already extraordinary journey. Dr. Brooks was gathering his medical journals when Maria Santos, the elderly grandmother who had shared her grandson's story, approached his seat with tears in her eyes. "Dr. Brooks," she said softly, "may I give you something?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a small photograph, a smiling 6-year-old boy in a soccer uniform holding a trophy. "This is Miguel after his first soccer game last month. The doctor said he might never run, never play sports. But look at him now." Dr. Brooks accepted the photograph with hands that had guided surgical innovations but trembled slightly with emotion. "Mrs. Santos, would you mind if I shared this photo with our research team? Sometimes they spend so many hours in laboratories that they forget why they're working. Miguel's smile will remind them." "Please," Maria whispered. "And Dr. Brooks, Miguel wrote you a letter after his surgery. I've been carrying it for 3 years, hoping somehow I might meet you." She handed him a carefully folded piece of construction paper covered in crayon drawings of hearts and stick figures wearing white coats. "Dear Dr. Brooks," the 6-year-old's handwriting began. "Thank you for making the machines that fixed my heart. Now I can run and play and hug my mommy tight. When I grow up, I want to help sick kids just like you did. Love, Miguel." The simple sincerity of a child's gratitude accomplished what corporate accolades and medical awards never could. It brought tears to Dr. Brooks's eyes. Lisa Rodriguez approached with her toddler Emma, who was clutching a tablet displaying a video call. "Dr. Brooks, my husband is a pediatric nurse at Northwestern Memorial. He wanted to thank you personally." On the screen, a young man in scrubs stood in what was clearly a hospital corridor. "Dr. Brooks, this is Luis Rodriguez. I've worked with your equipment for 5 years. Your monitors have helped us save dozens of premature babies, but I never imagined my wife and daughter would meet you on a random flight. Thank you for everything you do." Brooks leaned down to speak with 2-year-old Emma, who was shyly hiding behind her mother. "Emma, your daddy helps save babies every day. That makes him a hero, just like your mommy who stood up for what was right today." Emma giggled and offered Dr. Brooks one of her animal crackers, the kind of pure gesture that cuts through all pretense and touches the human heart directly. Robert Chen, the tech executive who had documented the entire incident, approached as he prepared to catch a connecting flight. "Dr. Brooks, I've posted the video of today's events, but I want you to know something. What impressed me wasn't just how you handled discrimination. It was how you turned an ugly moment into an opportunity for education and connection." He showed Dr. Brooks his phone, where thousands of comments were pouring in from viewers sharing their own experiences with bias and their admiration for his dignified response. People are calling you a role model, but more importantly, they're examining their own assumptions about others. That kind of reflection creates real change. Carlos Rivera, the flight attendant who had initially failed to address the discrimination adequately, waited until other passengers had finished their conversations before approaching Dr. Brooks. "Sir, I know I apologized earlier, but I want you to understand something. Today changed how I see my job. I'm not just serving drinks and checking seatbelts. I'm protecting the dignity and safety of every passenger. Your example showed me what courage looks like." Dr. Brooks smiled warmly. "Mr. Rivera, growth requires recognizing our mistakes. You did that today. The question isn't whether we stumble, it's whether we choose to get back up and walk differently." As they spoke, Captain Maria Santos emerged from the cockpit to personally bid farewell to Dr. Brooks. "Doctor, in 22 years of flying, I've never witnessed anything like what happened today. You transformed an incident of hatred into a moment of humanity. Our crew will never forget the lesson you taught us about grace under pressure." She paused, then continued with obvious emotion. "My nephew was born with spina bifida. The monitoring equipment at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta helped doctors detect complications early enough to prevent paralysis. I just realized that equipment came from Brooks Medical. So thank you, not just for today's dignity, but for giving my family hope." The personal connections kept revealing themselves, creating an emotional tapestry that demonstrated how Dr. Brooks's life work had touched countless families in ways he'd never know. A ground crew member approached as Dr. Brooks prepared to leave the aircraft. "Dr. Brooks, I'm James Wilson. My daughter had heart surgery at Emory Children's 5 years ago. The surgeon said your company's imaging equipment made her operation possible. She's 11, now plays violin, dreams of becoming a musician. Each story added another layer to the emotional resolution, showing that the man who had faced discrimination with such dignity was responsible for creating hope in countless families." Dr. Brooks pulled out his phone and made a call to his assistant. "Sarah, I want you to coordinate with our foundation. I met several families today whose children were helped by our equipment. Let's arrange for our medical team to provide ongoing support and monitoring." He looked around at the passengers who had stood with him, supported him, and shared their stories with him. "Also, Sarah, I want to establish a new scholarship program, the Flight 1247 Dignity Scholarship, for students pursuing careers in healthcare, aviation, or civil rights. These passengers showed me what courage looks like when it matters most as Dr. Brooks finally left the aircraft. He paused at the doorway to speak with the ground crew and airport staff who had gathered to meet him. Today, strangers became witnesses to both the worst and best of human nature. You saw prejudice exposed and dignity defended. You saw assumptions challenged and character revealed. But most importantly, you saw a community form around the simple idea that every person deserves respect. He looked back at the airplane that had become an unexpected classroom in human values. This aircraft carried more than passengers today. It carried a lesson about recognizing the humanity in everyone we meet. That lesson doesn't end when we disembark. It continues every time we choose kindness over assumption, respect over prejudice, connection over division. The ground crew applauded as Dr. Brooks walked through the jet bridge toward his connecting gate. But the real applause was happening in the lives of families whose children were healthy because of his innovations in the changed perspective of passengers who had witnessed integrity under fire, and in the broader conversation about dignity and respect that would ripple outward from this moment. Maria Santos held her husband's hand as they walked through the airport, Miguel's photograph safely tucked in her purse alongside the memory of meeting the man who had saved her grandson's life. Lisa Rodriguez carried Emma while video calling her husband to share every detail of their extraordinary flight experience. Robert Chen's video was being shared across social platforms, but more importantly, it was being used in corporate training sessions and university ethics courses as an example of how character reveals itself under pressure. Carlos Rivera returned to his duties with a fundamentally changed understanding of his role in protecting passenger dignity. And Captain Maria Santos filed a flight report that would become required reading in airline diversity training programs nationwide. Flight 1247 had started as routine transportation and ended as transformational experience. The discrimination intended to humiliate Dr. Brooks had instead revealed the depth of his character and the breadth of his impact on the world. But perhaps the most powerful resolution came from 6-year-old Miguel Martinez, who was video calling his grandmother as her flight landed. "Grandma, did you really meet the doctor who saved my heart?" "I did, mijo." "What was he like?" Maria Santos smiled through her tears. "He was exactly like you'll be when you grow up to save children. Kind, smart, and strong enough to stay calm when mean people try to hurt him. I can't wait to be a doctor, Grandma." And Miguel, "When you do become a doctor, you'll remember to treat everyone with respect, no matter how they look or where they sit." Just like Dr. Brooks did. Just like Dr. Brooks did. The cycle of inspiration, dignity, and hope continued, proving that character creates legacy, respect generates respect, and sometimes the most important flight is the one that teaches us how to soar above our worst impulses toward our best possibilities. 3 months later, American Airlines implemented the Brooks Protocol, requiring bias intervention training for all staff and real-time discrimination reporting measures. Jennifer Walsh entered voluntary bias counseling and began pro bono work for civil rights organizations, transforming her law practice to focus on defending victims rather than corporations. Her journey from discriminator to advocate became a powerful testament to the possibility of personal growth and redemption. The viral Everyone Stand moment became a defining example of how dignity defeats discrimination. Brooks Medical Technologies established a $5 million annual fund supporting diversity in aviation and healthcare, while Dr. Brooks continued his quarterly hospital visits, now accompanied by greater public awareness of bias in everyday interactions. The Flight 1247 Dignity Scholarship Program has provided educational opportunities for over 200 students pursuing careers in service to others. The flight that day proved that respect recognizes no seat assignment. Dignity travels in any section, and character needs no ticket upgrade. Sometimes the person sitting next to you carries more grace than you'll ever know, and sometimes justice arrives 35,000 feet above the ground when ordinary people choose to stand up for what's right. Dr. Brooks still flies first class to medical conferences, but now he's recognized not for the color of his skin, but for the content of his character and the lives he's saved through quiet dedication to healing the world one child at a time. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that dignity and respect have no color barriers, then share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Hit that like button to help us reach more people with stories that matter. Subscribe to our channel for more moments when humanity defeats hatred, when character conquers prejudice, and when ordinary people become extraordinary examples of what's possible when we choose courage over comfort. Because the next story we tell might be the one that changes everything for someone watching. Until next time, remember that respect recognizes no seat assignment. Dignity travels in any section, and character needs no ticket upgrade.